It was supposed to be a simple afternoon. Nicole, my daughter-in-law, had suggested we take the train into the city together. It's just for fun, she said. We can walk around, maybe have a late lunch, just the two of us. At first, I thought it was sweet. She hadn't shown much interest in spending time with me since marrying my son Eric almost 10 years ago. But she was smiling, animated, almost warm when she brought it up that morning. I didn't question it. I packed a light. Lunch for the ride, some sandwiches, fruit, and bottled water because that's what I always did. I'm not the kind of woman who likes to spend money unnecessarily. And I wasn't about to change that just because Nicole had suddenly decided to be friendly. We parked at the station. Just before noon. Hold on a moment before we move forward. Let us know where in the world you're watching from. And if you're loving these stories, don't forget to hit subscribe. Tomorrow's episode is going to be absolutely mind-blowing. Nicole was quiet on the drive there, texting someone the whole time. I didn't pry. I sat in the passenger seat, holding my purse on my lap, waiting for her to say something, anything. When she did finally speak, it was as she pulled into the parking lot. "Let's just go ahead and get your ticket first," she said, eyes still on her phone. I followed her out of the car, still not thinking anything strange. She walked quickly, and I had to hurry to keep up. We got to the ticket counter. She leaned in and said she would buy my ticket and meet me on the platform. I nodded, handed her a 20, and she walked off, typing away again. 5 minutes later, a clerk called my name and gave me a printed ticket one way. I remember frowning. I wasn't sure why she would get me a one-way ticket. But I assumed maybe she had a return trip planned from the city by car. Maybe she'd mentioned it and I forgot. The platform was mostly empty, the sun hot overhead. I stood near a bench, clutching my purse and the small lunch bag I brought. The train was due in 10 minutes. I checked my phone, no new messages. I called Nicole, straight to voicemail. That was when the first real wave of confusion hit me. I called again, nothing. I texted, "Where are you?" No answer. Then the train came. And Nicole didn't. I sat there and watched the train doors open and close. I waited. Another train came and went. I tried calling Eric, my son. His number rang once and went to voicemail. I tried again. No answer. My phone battery was at 23%, and I hadn't brought a charger. Hadn't thought I'd need one. That was when it started sinking in. She left me. I was sitting alone at the train station with no money, no return ticket, and no idea what was going on. There was a woman sitting nearby, early 30s, kind face. She watched me struggle with my phone, and eventually she came over. "Do you need help?" she asked gently. I hesitated before nodding. "My daughter-in-law brought me here, and now I can't reach her." "Can I call someone for you?" she offered. I shook my head, swallowing the tight feeling in my throat. "I'll be fine. I think I'll just sit here for a bit." The woman gave me a bottle of water and sat with me for a few minutes. She didn't pry. Eventually, she left. I sat there for over an hour, trying not to let the truth settle in too hard. It wasn't just a miscommunication. Nicole had planned this. The way she rushed me through the station. The way she said she'd meet me instead of go with me. The way she avoided eye contact. It had been building for a while. Now that I think of it, it's comments she made when I walked into the room. Quiet, sharp, always with a smile. It's the way she rolled her eyes when I asked about the kids. The fact that she and Eric had moved into my house 5 years ago and slowly made it feel like I was a guest in it. But I never imagined this. When I realized I had no way home, I asked a transit agent to call a cab for me. It took nearly 40 minutes to arrive, and I could barely stay awake on the drive back. I kept wondering, what was the point of this? Was it a warning? A message? When I got to the house, the front door was locked. The lock had been changed. I rang the bell. No answer. I rang again. Nothing. I stepped back, heart pounding. My own son had changed the locks on me. I sat on the porch, completely still. There was a small bench under the front window, and I sat there for what must have been an hour. My phone was dead. I had no key, no access. I didn't want to ask a neighbor. I didn't want to look anyone in the eye. That night, I slept at a motel 2 towns over, paid with a credit card. I never used one of the accounts Eric didn't know about. I'd kept it in a drawer behind some old files. I hadn't touched it in over a year. Lying in that motel bed, I stared at the ceiling and let everything come into focus. Nicole had said over the years, the way Eric had slowly stopped asking me anything. How every holiday I'd prepared became too much. And they eventually stopped inviting me to family dinners at my own table. They had been pushing me out for years. This wasn't sudden. It was quiet, gradual, and now final. But what they didn't know, what they had never thought to ask, was that I wasn't just some old woman they could shove aside. I had more than they realized, more than they could even guess. They thought I was weak, helpless, dependent. But that night, in that cold, thin motel blanket, I made a decision. If they didn't want me, they'd never get a cent from me again. No house, no money, no gifts, no help, nothing. They had left me on that bench like I didn't matter, and now I would quietly take back everything they thought they had. I stayed in that motel room for 2 nights. The first night was filled with confusion. The second was different. I didn't cry. I didn't feel sorry for myself. I was quiet, thinking, watching the ceiling fan spin, and listening to the muffled sounds of other guests through the walls. Something in me had changed. By the 3rd morning, I knew. I wasn't going back to that house, not the way things were. I checked out, thanked the woman at the front desk, and drove across town to a small diner I used to visit with Eric when he was little. I sat at a booth in the corner, ordered a coffee, and took out the same small notepad I always kept in my purse. I wrote 1 sentence at the top of the page. They made a mistake. Then I made a list. Everything that was still in my name. Everything I still had access to. Every account, every password, every safety net they didn't know existed. I still had the house in my name, despite what Nicole may have told herself. I still had my pension, and a private savings account Eric had never asked about. And I had something even more valuable. Time. They thought I had nowhere to go. That I'd come crawling back. They didn't know me. After breakfast, I drove to the bank. Not the local branch one farther out that I used for anything tied to the savings account Eric didn't know about. I walked in, greeted the same manager who had helped me open it years ago, and asked for an appointment. By noon, I had transferred the majority of my assets to a new trust, a private one under my maiden name. I removed Eric as an emergency contact. I updated every file. "Are you sure you want to remove your son?" the manager asked, scanning the screen. "I'm sure." I said. That same afternoon, I went to the county assessor's office. The deed was still mine. The house they locked me out of still under my name. Eric and Nicole were never added. They never paid a cent for it. I paid off that mortgage on my own 5 years before Eric lost his job and moved in temporarily. He had promised they'd only stay for 6 months while they got back on their feet. That was almost 5 years ago. I sat in the car afterward and watched the front door of the house from across the street. I didn't get out. I didn't want to speak to anyone. I only watched. Nicole came out first, carrying a trash bag, talking on the phone. She looked calm, unbothered, not a trace of guilt in her face. She threw the bag into the bin and went back inside. Eric's car was in the driveway. I didn't see him. I didn't try to call. I knew he wouldn't answer. I drove away that night. Stayed with Mrs. Langley, an old friend from church who'd been widowed the year before. She gave me the guest bedroom. No questions asked. She didn't push, didn't ask what happened. She just opened the door and said, "Stay as long as you need." I told her I wouldn't be a burden, that I was handling it. She believed me. The next few days were quiet. I didn't tell anyone what had happened. I didn't go to the police. I didn't tell my sister or my neighbor or the women from my quilting group. I didn't need pity. I needed to think, to move carefully. That Friday, I checked my email. Eric had sent a message. "Hi, Mom. Sorry for the confusion earlier this week." Things got a little hectic with the kids. Nicole thought you had other plans, and I didn't realize she left you at the station until later. Anyway, we can talk about it soon. Let me know when you're coming back. No apology, no explanation. Just excuses and lies. I didn't respond. The following day, Nicole texted, "Hey, we should talk soon. Sorry about the mix-up. Hope you're okay." Another lie. Another cover-up. I didn't answer her either. Instead, I scheduled another meeting with my attorney. I hadn't updated my will in over 4 years. It was time. I removed Eric as the executor. I removed Nicole from everything. I added 2 charities I respected. I added my niece in Vermont, who always sent me birthday cards, even when Eric forgot. I updated the power of attorney documents. I changed the emergency contact to my lawyer's firm. Everything that was once tied to my son's name gone. My attorney, Mrs. Pearson, looked at me when we finished signing. "You're serious about this?" she said. "I should have done it sooner," I replied. The next week, I drove past the house again. I parked a block away and walked to the edge of the property. I could see the curtains in the living room had been changed Nicole's. Taste, not mine. She'd taken down the flower boxes, removed the wind chimes Eric made in high school. The mailbox still had my last name on it. That would change soon, too. I was sure. I stood there for a long time. Then I turned around and walked away. That same evening, Eric called. First time in over a week. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. "Mom, I really don't understand what's going on. Nicole said you're ignoring her. I thought you'd come back by now. I don't know why you're making this into something bigger than it is. Just call me, okay?" I saved the message but didn't reply. That was the moment it became clear. They still believed they had control. They thought they could treat me like an afterthought, and I would just accept it. They had no idea what I was doing behind the scenes, and I intended to keep it that way. I started looking for apartments the next day. Something small, quiet, a place where no one knew my name. I found a unit on the 3rd floor of a brick building on the west side of town, clean. Modest, with a balcony and a decent view of the park. I signed a 6-month lease in cash and moved in without telling a soul. I changed my phone number. I opened a new P.O. box. I left no forwarding address for the first time in years. I slept without the sound of anyone else moving around the house. No footsteps, no door slamming, no arguments about the thermostat or what brand of orange juice to buy. Just silence. A week later, I received a letter. "Mom, we're starting to get worried. Are you okay? Can you just let us know where you are? We don't know what's going on. And the kids miss you." The handwriting was Eric's, but the message wasn't about love. It was about fear. He had started to realize I wasn't coming back, that I wasn't playing along anymore. I folded the letter and put it away. They had made their choice when they changed those locks, when Nicole walked away from me at that train station, when Eric let days go by without calling, when they thought I was too dependent, too slow, too irrelevant to fight back. They had chosen distance. Now I was choosing silence. When I closed the envelope and set Eric's letter back on the kitchen counter, I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel sadness either. What I felt was certainty. It was the first time in years I could make a decision without needing to ask anyone for permission, approval, or space. My new apartment was small, yes, but it was mine. I didn't have to check if someone had used up the hot water. I didn't have to move my things out of a common space to make room for Nicole's seasonal decorations. If I didn't have to be told that the kids don't like it when you comment too much. I could finally hear myself think it took me 4 days to unpack fully. I set up my desk by the window, placed my mother's old lamp beside my reading chair, and hung the small oil painting that used to be in my bedroom, one of the few things I managed to take before they made it clear I wasn't welcome back in my own house. The first real moment of peace came when I opened my financial records again. Not out of panic or necessity, but because I was finally ready to use them the way I had planned. Back when my husband, Charles, passed away, we split our accounts strategically. Some in my name, some joint. Before he got sick, he told me more. Then once, don't ever let anyone make you feel like you're helpless. Even me, especially not Eric. At the time, I thought he was just being cautious. But now, it felt like he had seen this coming. After his funeral, Eric and Nicole started making suggestions almost immediately. Maybe it's time to downsize, Nicole had said while we were still putting the sympathy cards away. You don't need a big house now that you're alone. Eric would chime in. We could help with the logistics, get everything organized, clean out the garage. They moved in within 6 months. It had never been about helping me. It was always about positioning themselves. The house, the finances, the car. I let it happen because I was grieving and because I still believed my son cared more about me than about what I owned. I was wrong. Now, sitting at my desk, I opened the folder I'd labeled Simply for Later. It had my original will, a breakdown of my investment accounts, 2 small properties I had inherited from my sister in Florida. Nothing flashy, but fully paid. One of them I'd been renting out for the last 3 years using a local agency. The other I had kept vacant just in case I ever needed a clean break. I had only mentioned it to Eric once, years ago. He waved it off. No point holding on to old things in another state, he had said. Just list it and take the cash. I never did. I called the management company that afternoon and asked for updated documents. They emailed me back the same day with a note from the local agent. We're glad to hear from you again. Stiz Dawson, everything is still in your name and fully secured. That was all I needed to read. I forwarded the documents to my attorney, Mrs. Pearson, and asked to schedule a transfer of part of my assets to a charitable trust specifically. The same local women's shelter I had volunteered with before Charles fell ill. They were always short on resources. Now, I had enough to make a difference. I also asked her to send the deed change request for the main house, the one Eric and Nicole were living in. Are you sure you want to move forward with that? She asked over the phone. I'm sure, I said. The title's still in my name. I want it out of my life. She hesitated. You understand this means they'll have to move? I understand. 2 days later, I got another voicemail from Eric. Mom, I know something's going on with the accounts. The bank said there were changes, and now there's a notice from the county office about property paperwork. Can you please just call me back? I listened to it twice and deleted it. Nicole emailed me that same afternoon, a short message. We really didn't mean for any of this to go the way it did. I think maybe we all just got overwhelmed. I'd like to meet and talk if you're willing. She signed it. Warmly, Nicole. There was no warmth in what she'd done. She left me on a train platform, took over my house, and let my son believe I was too old to manage on my own. She let him believe I needed them. Now they were realizing how wrong they were. I didn't reply. The notice to vacate was official and non-confrontational. They had 30 days. I made sure they had enough time to plan, find another place. I wasn't being cruel, was being clear. A week later, my phone rang again. This time, it was Nicole. I let it go to voicemail. Hi, I know you're getting all the legal stuff, and I just wanted to say, this isn't necessary. We can work this out. The kids miss you. Eric's under a lot of pressure right now, and he's just confused. Maybe you could come for dinner. We can explain everything. Please think about it. I didn't need explanations. I needed boundaries. Later that day, I took a walk through the park. It was cold out and quiet. I watched a group of older women walk by laughing, their scarves blowing in the wind. They looked like they had nowhere urgent to be. I missed that feeling. Back when I used to go to quilting club, before everything became about Eric and Nicole's schedules, I felt like I was part of something. I hadn't realized how much I had stopped doing. How many of my own routines had been replaced. That evening, I looked up the schedule for a community center not far from my apartment. They had a Wednesday night book club and a Thursday afternoon bridge group. I marked both on my calendar. I was building something new. Eric sent one final message for days before the notice period ended. You're going to regret this. We were just trying to help. You've lost your family over something that could have been fixed. But I hadn't lost anything. I'd finally reclaimed it by the end of the month. The house was cleared. My lawyer confirmed they had moved out. Without protest, the key was returned through her office. There were no more letters, no more calls. I hired a local agency to put the property on the market, and within a week there was already an offer. I sold it. The next step was something. I hadn't told anyone, not even Mrs. Langley, who still checked in on me once a week. I booked a flight to Florida to visit the second house, the one my sister left me. I needed to see it again, maybe fix it up, maybe stay, maybe not. But for the first time in years, the decision was mine. The flight to Florida was uneventful. I arrived with a single suitcase and no return ticket. I didn't tell Eric. I didn't tell Nicole. I didn't tell anyone from back home. The house was in a quiet neighborhood near Port Charlotte. I hadn't seen it in nearly 8 years. My sister had kept it in decent condition until she passed, and since then, the property manager I hired sent me annual reports and photos. But I never visited. When I pulled into the driveway, it looked almost the same as I remembered. Modest. One-story pale green shutters. The lawn was trimmed. The mailbox still had her name on it. Margaret Dawson. I stood there for a moment, just looking at the front door. Inside, the air was still. Not stale, just untouched. The furniture had been covered in white sheets. The living room had her old recliner, the same crocheted blanket over the back, as if she'd just stepped out for groceries. I walked slowly through each room, pulling back sheets, opening windows. The place was small, but it had heart. She had loved this house. And for the first time, I saw it as more than just Margaret's place. It could be mine now. Not just legally, but practically. The next morning, I went to the small diner down the block, the kind of place where they remember your name after 2 visits and ask if you want your eggs like last time. The waitress was young, probably early 20s. She called me ma'am and smiled like she meant it. I asked if they needed help part-time, not because I needed money, but because I wanted to move again, slowly, towards something that was mine. I'll check with the manager, she said, jotting down my number on the back of a receipt. I didn't expect a call back, but the gesture felt good by the 3rd day. I had already signed the new utilities under my name and scheduled a home inspection. The roof needed some repair. The back porch could use refinishing, but everything worked. The plumbing, the appliances, even the old ceiling fans. While I was sorting through Margaret's desk drawers, I found a box of old photographs. Some of us as kids, some of her own family. A few of Eric when he was young, before the distance grew between us. I almost put those aside, but I left them in the box. I wasn't ready to throw away everything. I just needed distance from what my life had become. That weekend, I checked my voicemail. I hadn't looked at it since I landed. 2 messages. The first was from Nicole. Hi, just checking if you're okay. We haven't heard from you. The house was cleaned out, and the agency said it's being sold. I guess that means you're really serious. Just, if you decide to come back, let us know. Second was from Eric. Mom, I wish you'd talk to me. I don't understand why you're doing this. If it's about Nicole, we can fix it. You don't have to make this permanent. Please don't shut me out forever. I didn't respond to either. They weren't reaching out because they understood what they'd done. They were reaching out because their plans were unraveling. For years, they assumed everything I had would eventually become theirs. The house, the savings, the little things I built with Charles. They thought they were entitled to it. But they never asked what I needed. They never treated me like a person, with choices. And now that I was making them, they didn't know how to respond. 1 week after I arrived in Florida, I got a certified letter from Nicole. It was from her, not a lawyer. She'd written it by hand. I know you're upset, and maybe you have a right to be. But you need to understand that family doesn't cut each other off like this. If you're sending a message to your grandchildren too, if you're teaching them that if something goes wrong, you walk away. I don't want them to grow up thinking that's normal. I hope you'll reconsider and come back to your family. She had underlined your family twice. I read the letter 3 times. Not once did she apologize. Not once did she mention leaving me at the station. Not once did she say the words, "I was wrong." I folded the letter and placed it in the drawer. I wasn't going to respond. I wasn't being cruel. I was being consistent. They were the ones who had drawn the line. I had simply stepped back far enough to see it. That same afternoon, got a call from the management company about the Florida house. "There's someone who'd like to speak with you." The woman said, "She's with a local women's group. They organize housing for older women who've been displaced." I told her you might be interested in donating or supporting. I said yes to the meeting. The woman came by the next day. Her name was Denise, mid-50s, polite, well-prepared. She brought a folder of information and explained that there were dozens of women in the county who had lost their homes after divorces, financial issues, or family problems. Many were couch surfing, some living in shelters, and they needed affordable, safe housing. "We help them get back on their feet," she said. "But what we really lack is space." I looked around the living room. "I might be able to help with that," I said. Denise didn't expect it, but I meant it. I asked her to give me a week to think. After she left, I walked out to the backyard. It was small, but open. A clean lawn. A place someone could feel safe in. I thought about Margaret and how she had always taken people in when they had nowhere to go. I thought about how far I had drifted from that part of myself, always giving to a family that never gave back. I sat down at the old patio table and took out my notepad. I made a new list. This one wasn't about what I had, it was about what I wanted to do with it. By the end of the week, I had made a decision. I would keep the Florida house. I'd renovate the second bedroom and open the home for temporary housing, only one woman at a time. No big organization, no publicity. Just a safe space for someone like me who needed a place to breathe. Someone who had been pushed out, discarded, or forgotten, and I would run it on my own terms. Quietly, privately, Nicole and Eric had wanted to erase me from their world because they thought I was finished. But now, they would learn slowly, quietly, that everything they counted on had started slipping away the moment. They left me at that train station. They had no idea the house was sold. They had no idea the accounts were moved. They had no idea I was building something they'd never be part of. They hadn't just lost a house. They had lost their safety net. And they still didn't know it. A month passed. I didn't tell Eric or Nicole anything about where I was or what I was doing. I didn't reply to their messages. I didn't answer any more calls. Every few days, a new voicemail came through from Eric. Each one sounded a little more tense than the last. First, it was polite confusion, then concern, then impatience. By the fifth message, his tone had changed. "Mom, if this is some kind of punishment, I don't understand what you're trying to prove. We already moved out of the house. You sold it. Fine. But don't forget, we're still family. You can't just disappear like this and pretend we never existed. You're better than that." He didn't realize how wrong he was. I wasn't pretending they didn't exist. I was finally choosing to exist without them, while they were still spinning. I was moving forward. I had already begun making minor repairs in the Florida house. A handyman named Carlos had come by twice a week to patch up some water damage in the guest bathroom and rework the front fence. I kept things quiet, no large renovations, nothing showy. It's just enough to make the space safe and livable. Denise, the woman from the housing group, came by again for coffee. I showed her the room. "I'm not running a shelter," I told her. "It's just one room. One woman at a time, no names on directories, no photos, no fundraising." She nodded with full understanding. "It's more than enough." The first woman arrived in early spring. Her name was Helen. She had gray hair and soft eyes. Her son and daughter-in-law had drained her retirement over 4 years and then evicted her when she couldn't give any more. Her story wasn't new to me. It was too familiar. And when she walked through the door with only one suitcase and a tote bag, I didn't ask too many questions. I just pointed to the bedroom and told her, "This is yours until you're ready." She cried that first night. I could hear her through the wall, but she was quiet about it. the same way I had cried in the motel weeks ago. It wasn't the loud kind of grief, was the kind that comes from being erased by the people you raised. Eric wouldn't have understood that kind of silence. 2 days later, finally got a letter. Not an email, not a voicemail. A real letter. From Nicole. It was typed 2 pages long. She had used proper formatting and polite phrasing. It's like she was writing a school essay. I know you've made your decision. And you're probably not interested in hearing from me. But I want to be clear about a few things. Yes, the situation at the train station was a mistake. And no, I didn't mean for things to go the way they did. But I hope you understand how much pressure Eric and I were under, and how we felt like we had to make choices for the good of our family. We never meant to hurt you. But you've taken everything away. The house, the connection with the kids. Eric barely sleeps. The children keep asking when Grandma is coming back. Yeah, now we're left picking up the pieces while you pretend we did something unforgivable. I truly hope you'll reflect on this. There it was, no ownership, no real apology, just justification. And behind it, Dear Nicole was finally starting to understand that the life she had built around my resources was no longer guaranteed. The woman she left on a train platform now controlled the next moves. And I hadn't said a word to her in nearly 2 months. I didn't reply to the letter. I didn't need to. That silence was doing what no argument ever could. That same week, received an email from my lawyer, Mrs. Pearson. She had been contacted by an attorney representing Eric. The message was short and vague, requesting clarification regarding certain financial transfers and property decisions that may have occurred under emotional distress or without full understanding of the consequences. I knew exactly what they were trying to do. They were testing if I'd flinch, if I'd reverse anything out of guilt. They didn't have a case. Every document I signed had been reviewed carefully. Every transfer, every title change, every update to my will had been legal and deliberate. Mrs. Pearson handled the response. I didn't even have to get involved. 3 days later, the calls stopped. No voicemails. No emails. Just a strange silence. For the first time, they were realizing I was serious. That they weren't entitled to explanations or reversals or second chances. They had gambled everything on the assumption that I would always put family first, even when family meant disrespect, manipulation, and control. But that version of me was gone. Helen stayed with me for 4 weeks. She helped around the house, cooked dinner some nights, and slowly started making calls to find part-time work. When she left, she hugged me and cried again, but this time, not from pain. I didn't think I'd ever be able to feel safe again. She said, I believed her. The next guest was a woman named Jody. Late 60s, quiet voice, no family left. We didn't talk much the first week. But one afternoon, while folding laundry side by side, she looked over and said, You have the look of someone who stopped being afraid. I thought about that for a while. She was right. It wasn't about money or property or punishment. It was about choosing not to live under fear of guilt, of obligation, of being discarded again. One morning, while I was reading in the kitchen, a delivery truck pulled up to the house. A box was left on the porch. No sender information. Inside. A framed photo. It was of me and Eric from years ago. Before Nicole, before the arguments. Before the disappointments. I remembered the moment. It was at a beach trip Charles had planned. And Eric must have found it in a drawer during the move. There was a note attached. I'm sorry, I miss when things were easier. Eric, no request, no explanation. Just that, I didn't cry. I didn't call him. I placed the frame back in the box and slid it under my bed. Some memories don't need to be thrown away, but they don't need to be displayed either. What Eric didn't realize was that this wasn't just about what they did at the station. It was about all the small choices they made before and after. The quiet dismissals, the assumptions. The way Nicole took over my space. The way Eric stepped back and let it happen. The way they acted like I owed them something just for being related. Now they were left with each other, and I had my life. The following weeks went by with quiet rhythm. The Florida house had become something stable, reliable. I found myself waking up earlier, opening the windows, cooking full meals against something I hadn't done in years. It's a kind of life I'd stopped having when Nicole turned my kitchen into a place I barely recognized. Helen and Jody had moved on, and now I had a new guest, a woman named Ruth, 71, whose daughter had drained her bank account and placed her in a retirement home without her consent. She was soft-spoken, walked with a cane, and reminded me of the version of myself I might have become if I hadn't taken that cab back from the train station. "I thought I was going to disappear," she said over breakfast once. "You saved me from that." But the truth was, they were saving me too. I hadn't heard from Eric or Nicole in over a month. The silence was no longer tense. It was final. I'd blocked their numbers. Mail from their address stopped arriving. I knew they hadn't forgotten me, but now they had no way to reach me. No address. No access to my lawyer without going through formal procedures. They had used every line of communication they could and burned them all. My bank accounts were now held in the new trust. The Florida house was officially transferred to a charitable foundation in my name, with me as sole executor. It wasn't about spite. It was about taking control. For years, I had handed over my decisions in the name of family unity, and they had used that to silence me. Now every signature on every page belonged to me alone. One morning, while cleaning out the closet in the guest room, I found an old photo album that had belonged to Margaret. I flipped through the pages, pausing on a picture of her and me on her porch years ago. I remembered that Dashi had warned me, gently, that Eric was pulling away from me. "Don't let them tell you you're lucky to still be needed," she had said. "The second you believe that, you'll start giving them everything you are just to stay visible." I hadn't listened then, but I had heard her now. That afternoon, I went to the community center and picked up a few flyers. They were starting a mentorship program for older women looking to get back into the workforce or start small businesses. I signed up as a volunteer mentor and offered to host weekly sessions at the house. I didn't need the recognition. I needed the connection. The first meeting had 3 women. The second had 8. They came with notebooks, questions, some with nothing more than the clothes on their back and a quiet kind of determination. They weren't helpless. They were rebuilding, just like I had. It wasn't until late one Thursday evening that I got a message. I hadn't expected. It was a handwritten letter from Nicole. It was shorter than the last one. Tidy cursive. The paper smelled faintly like lavender. "I understand now. Maybe not everything, but enough. You were never trying to hurt us. You were trying to survive us. We pushed and pushed, and you finally stepped away. I don't blame you. I don't expect you to write back. I just wanted you to know I see it now." There was no apology again. No request. Just that dot. I read it twice. Folded it. Slid it into a drawer. I didn't need closure from her. I had already created my own. The final proof that things had truly shifted came not long after. A mutual acquaintance from church back home called me one evening. She hadn't known I moved, just wanted to catch up. We talked for 20 minutes. Then, casually, she said, "I saw Eric at the market. He looks tired. Said something about downsizing. Nicole wasn't with him. That was it." She didn't know the story. Didn't ask for details. But it was all I needed to hear. They were unraveling. Not because I destroyed anything, but because I took back what they had quietly built on top of me. I didn't hate them. I just didn't owe them anything anymore. By the end of that month, the guest room was occupied by a 4th woman. Her name was Sylvia, 62, a retired teacher whose own children had stopped speaking to her after she refused to give up her house. We had tea one evening. She asked me directly, "How did you do it? How did you walk away?" I didn't give a long answer. I just said, "One step at a time." And no looking back. She nodded slowly, like that was enough. On the wall above the kitchen table, I had put up a new corkboard. Not with family photos, but with names of women who had passed through their goals, their first steps towards something better. Helen, safe housing. Independent Jody, part-time work, stable income. Ruth, legal aid. Pension restored Sylvia, currently with me, learning each one, had a small pin, and under it, the words, "They didn't disappear. I wasn't waiting for Eric to come knocking. I wasn't waiting for Nicole to ask forgiveness. I didn't need them. To understand the damage they caused, I only needed one thing now to make sure no other woman felt like the only way to be seen was to be silent. Okay? Obedient or small. They had counted on me being quiet. They never expected me to rebuild, and now, without ever raising my voice, I had removed every piece of ground they thought they stood on. That was the part they never saw coming.